Hi, I'm Bill Peard, your host on Capitol Preview. This segment will go through the legislative process. Some of the legislative process was former State Senator Jeff Angelo. Jeff, tell us a little bit about, everybody hears this week, starting last week and into this week, that this is the end of the funnel week in the legislature. What does funnel mean? And why is it important to the process?
That's a great question, because I always think that the citizens hear a lot in the media about funnel, 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 and they're like, I don't understand, what does that mean?
Right. Yeah.
Basically, this is a process by which the legislature cuts down the amount of work that it has for the remainder of the year. So visualize a funnel. Usually, at the beginning of each session, there are almost 1,500 bills filed by legislators, legislative chairs. They need a way to winnow the process down and just have a few bills to contemplate as the session's coming to an end. Because the session only lasts 110 days, Bill, and that was always amusing to me when I was a legislator. A lot of citizens don't understand that the session is only 110 days. I'd show up, say, at a high school baseball game, and people would say, hey, are you on break? And I'd say, well, no, we adjourned a couple of months ago. That's humbling, because then you know people aren't paying attention to absolutely everything you say and do. So what has to happen here is a bill has to come out of a committee this week in order for it to be contemplated for the rest of the session. That's why at the end of this week you'll see a lot of news stories about what didn't make the funnel, because any bill that doesn't come out of a committee this week cannot be considered for the rest of the session. There's a couple of exceptions. Ways and Means, which is the tax writing committee of the legislature, and the Appropriations Committee, which is the budget committee of the legislature. Those committees don't have funnel deadlines. Tax bills and budget bills can be contemplated all the way through the end of the session. But subject matter bills, like bills that come through the Natural Resources Committee, have to come out of one committee this week to be considered for the rest of the session.
Got it. So Jeff, what else about the legislative process? I mean, if you were to gauge where this is at in a time spectrum, so what is funnel week? What happens in funnel week?
Yeah, it really becomes
a
frenzy, because nothing like a good deadline to have legislators absolutely have to decide what they want to do with the bill. So you'll have several committees this week that'll have really long committee meetings, and they'll have agendas. I've seen agendas up to 20 bills in one committee, because subcommittees, smaller committees, have been working on the wording of the bill, but this really is the moment of truth. You absolutely have to pass a bill out of a committee, and so it's that deadline that forces legislators really to make a decision on how a bill is going to look. And then you get these committee meetings that are very long. They have long agendas, a lot of bills coming out onto the floor so that these ideas can stay alive for the rest of the session.
Very good. Jeff, anything else? I mean, you were a senator for a number of years. What else can you tell us a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes right now?
Yeah, this is kind of a frenzy. Obviously, if you're a lobbyist, one of the things that you're trying to do is desperately, if you've got a client, for example, that needs a specific bill that you want out of the legislature, you've got to get that bill out of committee. Otherwise, you sadly have to go back to your client next week and say, I'm sorry, I didn't get that bill out of a committee. So there's a lot of frenzied lobbying going on right now with lobbyists and legislators trying to get bills out of the committee. There are long committee meetings. That's why, Bill, actually this week, it's a little bit tough if you're just a citizen that comes to the Capitol and you put in a note trying to find a legislator. It gets very hard to do that, because they're either getting their arms twisted, literally and figuratively, behind the scenes by a lobbyist, or they've got really long meetings where they're trying to hammer out these individual bills that have come out of the funnel. Now, this week will be the first funnel. So there's a second funnel a little bit later in the session. The second funnel means that if a bill will have to have passed one chamber and then come out of the committee in the other chamber to continue to be alive. So you can continue to see this winnowing process going on as the legislative session continues. So this week, the bill has to come out of one committee. It then has to come out of the one chamber and then come out of a second committee by the second funnel deadline to continue to be considered. So yeah, this is a very frenzied week for legislators, really long days, and it can be frustrating at times for citizens if they've come up to the Capitol this particular week to try to get a hold of their legislator. One of the things that I always advise citizens to do is, before you come up to the legislature, email or call them and tell them what day and what time you'll be there. Legislators will bend over backwards to meet with their constituents if they know they're going to be there. One of the more frustrating things for a legislator is a small group comes up from their district and they were unaware that they were going to be there, and then there'll be a little note on the desk from their district saying, sorry, we missed you, we were here. That's very disappointing for a legislator because he didn't or she didn't know that they were going to come and they happened to be in a committee meeting. So my advice to citizens, particularly this week, is go ahead and throw an email to your legislator, give them a phone call, tell them what time, what day you're going to be there. They'll be glad to come out and meet you if they know you're going to be there. But a lot of times if people just simply show up and hope to meet with their legislator, that's disappointing for both the constituent and the legislator because they didn't know that the constituent was going to be there and the legislator was in a committee meeting.
Does the same thing hold true for, because if you've been up there during the week,
Right.
there is a ton of advocacy groups that come up there that bring their whole membership in,
Right.
set up little booths in the rotunda. Do they tend to discourage those during?
The advocacy groups are a little bit better about, first of all, they know where the funnel weeks are, and so a lot of times they'll avoid them. But if they are going to be up there, the groups are usually fairly good about just sending a general email to the legislator saying, we're going to have citizens from your district up here this week. Or they'll actually catch the legislator and say, hey, I've got some citizens coming up tomorrow. It'll be around 1, 2 o'clock. Can you be available? The legislator will always say yes. But I do see a lot of groups kind of avoid this week, Bill, because any funnel week is a frenzied week for the legislator involving a lot of meetings.
Yeah. Yep. It's almost good that we have this kind of a process, I think, don't you? I mean, because it seems like things get debated, they're slower, they go back and forth,
Right.
And this kind of forces them to
Right,
focus.
and this didn't always exist. The legislature didn't open up with rules like a funnel week and deadlines, and that's what happened over time as more and more legislators would come to the session and say each individual legislator, we've got 150 legislators, each individual legislator would propose, say, 10 bills. So there's your 1,500 bills. Eventually, the leadership had to say, we need some rules for being able to winnow these bills down so that we can completely focus on what we really need to get done. So it does make sense from a process standpoint. You do have only 110 days in an off-year session to get your work done. And of course, Bill, what also is coming up is the budget. And you've got to have a lot of time to work on that as well. So this is a great way of winnowing the workload down for legislators, and they're able to basically focus on some policy things, but they also now they have to start working on the budget. That's also an interesting time of the year for the legislators because each individual budget matter like agriculture, natural resources, will get a target. So in each individual budget, they'll get a target for how much they can spend for the year. Then they have to divvy up the resources and make a proposal to the entire General Assembly. So your funnel deadline allows you to funnel down to basically what subjects you still need to be handling, but also gives you time to complete your budget work as well.
So Jeff, let me ask you that brings up an interesting point. So if a bill passes, say it goes through the funnel, it passes the first funnel and the second funnel, and the bill passes, does that bill then is that part of, they take that up in the budget process then? That's going to cost, if it's a tax bill, for instance?
Right, yeah. A tax bill can come up as part of a budget bill, or actually spending can come up as part of a budget bill. What you'll actually see as you reach the close of the session is just these very long general sessions. There won't be many committees anymore.
I see.
So a budget bill will come up, and then a subject bill will come up, and then a budget bill will come up, and then a subject bill will come up. So you're really winnowing down those topics that you want to deal with. And then you've got the budget to pass. And as the leadership always tells legislators, the only thing we absolutely have to do every year is pass a budget. So you have to pass a budget. However, you don't have to pass a single other idea bill for the rest of the session if you don't want to. Right. Now, this legislature, of course, is going to, but there's always that threat. It's like, get your work done because we don't have to pass any kind of topics of a bill. We only have to pass a budget for the remainder of the year. And so both legislators will both be working on the budget and their topics for the year.
Very interesting. Thank you, former Senator Jeff Angelo. And stay tuned for our next episode of Capitol Preview.